back again with another indie author that I found on TikTok. This is Silver Linings Drawn by Elisa Ann Pratt. It is part one of the Silver Linings trilogy, and it has a couple trigger warnings in there I'm going to share with you. The note from Elisa says, "This story contains sensitive material that may be disturbing to some readers for containing the following subjects: abusive relationship, addiction, alcoholism, anxiety, sexual assault, and sexually explicit content. Reader discretion is advised." I spoke with Elisa about the chapter that I wanted to read, and I'm going to start with chapter 2 because we both felt that chapter 1 was a little heavy on the trigger warnings, and I didn't want to use the video to upset anyone. So I'm going to start with chapter 2. This was it. I was so done. Frantically, I began stuffing my duffel bag with as many clothes as I could fit. At any moment, he might wake up and drag me back to bed, or God only knows what else. I grabbed my toothbrush and snuck a glance at myself in the mirror. I looked completely disheveled in my reflection, and my hair was a tousled mess. I quickly tossed my long, wavy auburn hair up in a ponytail, grabbed a baseball cap, some dark shades, and my keys, and quietly slipped out the front door. Where was I even going? I had no friends in this town. He made sure of that. I hurried to the car, quickly tossing my duffel bag and purse onto the passenger seat. I drove off into the night, considering myself very lucky that AJ never woke up. Phew! He would never have let me leave if he had woken. Heaven knows what I would have had to endure if I had even attempted while he was awake. AJ and I came here for a fresh start just over 8 months ago when his transfer got approved. He was offered a promotion to manage a construction crew with a company work truck to boot. It all seemed like a dream come true. Everything was perfect right up until his company laid off half their staff less than a month later due to permit issues. Last to come was unfortunately first to go, and AJ Stratton's dream job was no more. At first it was nice, coming home from work to find the house clean and dinner prepared, but after only a few short weeks of unemployment, AJ started drinking again, heavily. Thus began the onslaught of my nightmare. By the time I would get home, AJ would be so drunk that the tiniest thing would easily set him off. He always blamed me for encouraging him to take the transfer. In truth, I may have been selfish, secretly wanting him all to myself. I thought maybe a fresh start away from his friends might help him stop drinking every weekend. They say hindsight is 20/20. If only I'd listened to my instincts when they told me his drinking was problematic, I probably never would have moved here with him in the first place. Instead, with blind optimism, I convinced myself of the fantasy that this transfer was a possibility for a new beginning. And it was, until everything went sour. The roads were still wet from the storm that had just passed. Because it was past midnight, I knew everything was closed except the 24-hour diner. Town was only 25 minutes away, so I figured I could stop there to order myself a cup of coffee. When I arrived, it was clear that the restaurant was completely empty. The waitress, overly consumed by the make-out session she was having with her boyfriend, didn't seem to notice my distress. Good. I wasn't ready for any explanations or judgment anyway. I quietly slipped into the booth and pulled out my cell phone. I stared at my contacts. Who could I even call at this hour of the night? I really didn't want to burden my mom with this. She'd already endured so much since Joel, my stepdad, passed away unexpectedly. It was 2006 and my junior year in high school. The financial burden our family suffered made it difficult for us to stay in our home. It was only natural for me to offer my mother the use of my college funds to help with the bills. When that money was gone, eventually our house was foreclosed on. After graduation, I got a job waiting tables and moved out on my own with some coworkers. This way, my mom and my baby sister Abby could find a smaller place to live. Mama clung to anything she could keep from our old house. It all reminded her so much of the life she loved so dearly. I think a part of her felt that donating Joel's belongings was like saying she was ready to let go of the only true love she had ever had. She and Abby were very cramped in that tiny apartment. Going home was not an option. Besides, Mama would be completely devastated if she knew that I'd spent the past 7 months being slapped around whenever AJ decided to drink himself into oblivion. She'd die if she knew all I'd had endured, especially after her history with my biological father, John. He was also a raging alcoholic. Mama left him when I was in preschool after coming home to find out he'd thrown away all my toys, all because I had accidentally knocked over one of his precious model train sets while he was passed out drunk on the couch. After taking another sip of my coffee, I pulled out some cash from my pocket and set it on the table. I gave a small wave, more to cover my face than to be friendly, as I stepped past the booth where the waitress and her boyfriend were sitting cozily together. My answers were nowhere to be found in this diner or in this town. I needed to drive and think, so I hit I-95 and headed north. I slowly allowed myself to begin processing all the damage and hurt AJ dished out towards me these past few months. The road signs were beginning to blur as my tears streamed more freely. Thankfully, I just got paid, so I had enough to cover a cheap motel to stay for the night. My job at the food mart didn't pay me much at all, but I was able to pick up an extra shift last week. After calling out 3 times this past month to hide bruises from my coworkers, I knew I had already been on my last leg. No one knew the pain I had endured. I felt so alone, guilt-ridden, and ashamed. AJ had a knack for always making me out to be the bad guy. Deep down, I knew it wasn't really all my fault, but I desperately wanted to see the AJ I had first met. And now I was beginning to wonder if perhaps those first couple of months we were together had all been an act. He sure laid down the charm in the beginning. I just couldn't understand how someone as charismatic as AJ was when we first met could turn so apathetically cold. I was happy to finally see a sign for a few motels, so I exited the highway and stopped at the first one I could find. I sat by myself in the parking space for a few minutes as I tried to muster some strength I needed to pull myself together before going inside. It was late August, and the air was stifling due to the record temperatures we'd been having. The breeze only exacerbated the foul stench in the air, likely from a rotting animal corpse nearby. The broken neon sign read VAC blank NCY. And by the look of things, I could easily see why. There weren't many other cars in the lot. It was a rundown and gloomy-looking motel with a small pool and a handful of rusty lounge chairs sitting just outside the reservation office. If there weren't a light on inside, I just may have found myself running for the hills. I stepped inside to find an older lady who was perhaps in her mid-50s. Her name tag read Dion. She was sitting behind a large front desk that was clearly made of synthetic wood. She had kind blue eyes, shoulder-length curly blonde hair, and a warm smile that made me feel a little better about my choice to stay here. "Hello, welcome to Highway Lodge Express. Can I help you?" she asked, as though she were reading from a script. "Yes, I would like to reserve a room, please," I replied. "Sure thing, honey. That'd be $62.40, please." She eyed me curiously, but thankfully didn't mention my busted lip or the dark shades I was wearing in the middle of the night. I handed her my credit card. After receiving an approval for the transaction, she handed me the keys. "Room number 118. "You okay, hun?" she asked. "Yes, thank you," I said, dashing for the door to escape the burden of being honest. "Checkout's at 11 a.m. and the Wi-Fi is spotty," she called out to me as I was leaving. I could hear her concern in the tone of her voice, but I was in no mood for consolation. I just needed sleep. Just as I expected when I walked through the door, the drapery, carpet, and bedspread all appeared musty and dated. It looked like the rooms hadn't been renovated since the 1980s. And for the most part, though, it was clean and had just what I needed, a bed. Besides, it was only for one night. I just needed to figure out exactly where I was headed. For now, all I wanted was to shower and sleep away this gnawing headache. That was Chapter 2 from Elisa Ann Pratt's first book in the Silver Linings trilogy, Silver Linings Drawn. Book 2 comes out soon, so keep an eye out for that one.